Hi guys, welcome back to the Conscious Couple episode 4.
Yes, welcome back, guys. We're excited to be here. Week 4. Today's topic that we figure we dive right into. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking habits and the character.
All right, let's do it.
Because I know you always talk about habits and it's true. What is the quote you always say about habits? Like, show me your habits. I can't remember who said that.
Oh yeah, I know. I can't remember the word for word right now, but it's like show me your habits, and I'll show you your character. I'll show you the person, something like that.
Yeah.
Essentially, habits are or our series of habits is the character and role and identity that we're always playing, and so what we call consciously ourselves, which is kind of like an identity that we've created, is actually just a series of habits and patterns that we have, done for years and years, or some of us decades and decades. And we said, oh, that's just who I am. And what neuroscience today teaches us is, no, there's something called neuroplasticity, which, is essentially talking about forming new brain, synapses and connections. So we have the ability to develop new skills, et cetera, and replace these old patterns or habits, or also neural patterns, neural networks and pathways, with new and what we would consider more enjoyable or preferential, habits.
Yeah. And so I think, well, the way you described it was perfect too. But I also, when I learned about this, it like kind of blew my mind. Because I remember hearing somebody say, oh, if you're not, the character, like you're existing behind your character. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And they're like, oh, if you've been thinking like that, you're wondering like what I'm talking about. You know what? This might have been you actually on Perspective Shift when I was editing it. I think you said that on Perspective Shift when I was editing it. And I remember being like, wait, what? And I didn't know, like, I never thought about the character being like different. But then I thought about it, and then I like had this weird moment where I was like, oh, you're not actually the character that you think that you are. You're not. We look at our personality like it's us, just to like break it down.
Well, like the most simple way I describe it is we are storytellers.
Yeah.
And we've told a story about where we were born, where we come from, what we went through to become the person we are today. And that story, or that series of stories, is what we call ourselves and who we are. But how we should really look at it as those are experiences that we've had. They are not the person you are. Those don't define you. Those are something in the past. That's something that doesn't, exist.
Yeah. What you are is just conscious. So you're literally just energy. That's what that I am is in the Bible. It's literally talking about I am. You just are. And then whatever you put after that is the character, but that's not actually who you are. And this is why you can change. When I talk about self-concept work on TikTok, or like you'll hear people say like changing your identity or changing your habits. That's literally what you're doing. You're literally selecting a new character, but you're like consciousness. My favorite way to describe it is like a video game, especially if you ever played The Sims, but any other game too, like where you're like literally just playing the game behind this computer screen, or like in front of the computer screen, and then you're choosing the character. You can choose what they're like. I like using The Sims because you can choose their traits, like what personality they have, whatever. You can change their hair color or whatever you want, and but you're just still playing with it behind the computer, and you can like change it at any point behind the scenes. That's literally what you're doing, like in real life.
That's a perfect analogy. Yeah. And I think this is why a lot of people love video games. They get lost in these characters that they create, and it's what they identify with, and that's fun. You can do the same thing internally. See, the whole trick is to understand how the brain and mind, works and functions, and how this body, which is actually just an instrument, works. And we're actually taught so outside of us, just mainstream media, all of the above. We're taught that we're this physical being that needs to I guess what
you're saying too is you're not only taught that you're a physical body and the character is who you are, you're also taught who the character is supposed to be, like based on like if you're a man, a woman, your race, whatever, like you're shown like this is what you're supposed to believe based on this is who you're supposed to be. And I don't want to get into conspiracies, but I feel like it's done for a reason.
No, totally. So, and I see what you're saying. That's exactly it. We're given these identities and we try to live up to them. And when you start to see them as, okay, these are a series of habits or patterns that have been passed on generation after generation, et cetera, you kind of start to poke holes in it and you can see through it and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't need to, carry these different ideas.
Yeah, that's totally true. And that's why when I talk about self-concept work, I always say it's like method acting when you want to choose a new character, because I remember like not even thinking that I could like be different, like, or anything. Like, I just remember thinking like, when people would talk about self-concept and changing who you were, I'm like, oh, I don't get it. Like, that's just how I feel. Or that's just that's just who I am. But then I kind of realized it wasn't that. And it was literally like a character. And so it's kind of like method acting. I always describe it like this on TikTok, but when actors will method act, like, Joaquin Phoenix did this in The Joker, like different, I think Jim Carrey did it too. But like when they're acting on and off set, they'll just speak in the character, like they will just like just was the Joker the whole time he did it, like on and off set, whether they were filming or not. And then he literally forgot who he was and thought he was the Joker, and the reason that happened was he literally built up a new neural pathway in his brain thinking from the Joker, so that was his new character. But you can do this consciously by like choosing who you want to be
with great healthy patterns that you love and want to experience.
Yeah, exactly. So you can, I always say, like, write down who you want to be, write down your traits, and then be like, how would that person like walk around or dress or whatever or act? And then you always just act from the character. I sometimes even think like, how would that character like react in this situation, and literally method act from there.
So that reminds me. So like that's kind of what it is when you start to see things from the perspective of, okay, I don't have to attach to this old pattern. I don't have to attach to this old story. A whole new world of opportunity opens up. And this is where the new you, if you will, comes into play. And you start to create a new reflection. But going back to like what Kayla just said, which was so important, is you need to begin to feel and fulfill that type of role. You know, if that's what you were experiencing, how would you act? You know, how would you feel? You know, we got to get out of the old momentum, you know, of the original, you know, unwanted neural network and neural pattern. And we want to turn this into, you know, a preferred and healthy and exciting pattern.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that you do that, the way you get rid of the old story, I always hear people ask that. It's like, how do you get rid of the old story? Literally just focusing on the new one, like you're talking about at the beginning. Because then the more you do that, the more you're just like firing the synapses in your brain over and over again. And your brain just goes, oh yeah, that's important, because you're doing it over and over again. And then it just eventually gets comfortable there.
I think it's important to also mention your brain, when you start to do this, at least this is how I experienced it, it will tell you everything it possibly can about, oh, this isn't working. Oh, you're faking it. You know, oh, this doesn't actually feel, it will try to really pull at you. And you have to, it's not fight it, because you don't want to fight anything. You know, you want to go, hey brain, I see what you're doing here. I get it. This is, true. you know, you want to be very neutral about it, because that's the more you put resistance on anything, the more it persists, the more you get of it. So when these, you know, intrusive thoughts come up, don't get angry at them. Don't try to push them away. Don't try to suppress them. Acknowledge them, like, okay, I see what the brain's doing here, and still maintain the focus of, you know, everything's working out exactly how it should, you know, to bring me closer and closer to my goals, or everything's working out exactly as it needs to be, you know, unfolding in my favor.
Yeah, that's so true. The reason your brain does that too, like that totally happened to me. Like and by the way, side note, I've heard like crazy stories about this. When you first start like listening to sleep subliminal tapes or sleep affirmation tapes, that gets to the subconscious easier. But like, even when I started doing that, my brain resisted it so much, because that was the first time I'd ever tried to like consciously change who I was being. It would literally, I burned up 2 phone chargers and I used different outlets, and then it burned up in the other charger. I would turn my phone off. I would wake up and take my headphones off in the night, because your mind really wants to be comfortable.
Physically discard it and get it away from you.
It would be like, no, like I could not believe that happened. I was like, what? And like, but I've had other clients say that too, or they'll just wake up anxious or something. And that's why your brain's like, no, this is not what we believe.
Well, and we touched on this in our subconscious episode, but the subconscious is always awake, always listening. Yeah. You know, and so the more we're feeding it, you know, when we're in that theta state, like when we first get up in the morning or when we're going to bed at night, whatever we're listening, you know, it's we're taking it directly into our subconscious. Yeah,
that's true. And so during the day, your conscious mind kind of filters it out. It's just like it's not as easy to imprint the subconscious during the day, unless you're like get yourself into like that lower or like beta theta state.
Yeah.
But
out of our beta state.
Yeah, and then what you're talking about is like when you first wake up and go to bed, it's like more you're still in that state. So like what you think about matters. What you like listen to matters when you first wake up and when you're sleeping.
And the reason Kayla and I will bring up like a brainwave state is this helps you kind of understand your experience more. So like when you're interacting, like right now, Kayla and I in conversation, we're in a beta state of brainwave. You know, this is your active working day-to-day life, etc., stuff like that. And as you go into an alpha and a theta state, etc., you know, and then delta, like sleep. Those are when you can imprint the subconscious much easier. There's not as much activity going on. And so that's why we kind of bring this up, is so you kind of hear, okay, scientifically, I'm understanding what's going on with my experience. Because at least for me, you know, I've always been kind of an analytical type of person. And so when I understood how it worked, I had so much more buy-in. And that buy-in then allowed me to have experience. And then experience allowed me to understand the truth. Now, you know, it's at the point where it's like, there's no other way to live because, you know, it's literally you holding yourself back every day that you're not living this way. And it's because we just don't know, because we put so many old programs on top of each other that are all negative. It takes a moment to kind of change each one of these old patterns, but you start to see all the negative patterns fall away and you're like, oh my goodness, this has been me the whole time. I've been my own worst enemy. I've been the person holding myself back. And I think that's the moment of realization that like comes with like waking up, is going, oh my gosh, there's no pointing the finger at anyone.
That's so true.
That's the reflection.
Yeah, I talked about that, I think, in the last episode, but I just remember having this like weird epiphany where I was like, oh my God, like I'm literally doing all of this. Like no one had any choice but to show up exactly how I was seeing them. Which that's
or
always so
how
funny.
I see myself, most
and
importantly.
that too, both of those things. Yeah.
Because
and
that's how I feel.
Oh, that's what everything is. It's just who you are in relation to them too, or just like who you are in general too. And I liked, it's funny because like, and we're like different because like I totally had like I've always been like weird spiritual woo-woo. Like I think I said that in the first episode. Not me too. See, like I know
I grew up a normal 3D life thinking everything sucked.
I did
the
too.
first 28 years of my life.
I totally did too, but I like knew about like spiritual stuff. Like I think I saw the ghost of my mom's cat, I think when I was like 2 or something, and I was like, what? I just remember being like, oh my God, ghost. Like I don't know, I just always was super spiritual, but I didn't get the mindset part of it. So like when I heard about manifestation, I was like, that makes sense. Like I didn't even question it. I was like, makes sense. And then like but the mindset part, I was like, oh, like I had to like actually get it. But that actually helped me too, like learning what you're talking about with the brain thing. Like whenever my brain fought it, and I was like, oh, this is just my mind doing its job. That helps me to like detach.
Exactly. It allowed me to detach. And this is where, like, I'll tell people who helped me most understand this was Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I do want to share him because he has such a great way of breaking this science down for you to really understand what your body's, you know, experiencing, and just how the mind works, how the brain works, etc., the pineal gland, all of this very important stuff that we're just never taught about. And it's science, you know, it's all science back. It's all the new neuroscience, and it's great. I would also recommend Dr. Bruce Lipton. He does epigenetics. You start to realize, holy crap, how I think, how I feel affects everything.
Yeah.
And the science completely shows this. And so when you have the buy-in, that's when things start to change, because your experience doesn't change when you're constantly going, I don't know if this works, and blah, 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 blah. And you're in this head chatter stuff. And it's because we've been taught so outside of us that like, we live in this world that, you know, that is an absolute physical world outside of us. And what science is now showing us is that's not true. Everything is energy, and how you think and feel affects the actual experiences that you have, the interactions you have, who you meet, your level of success, your romantic relationships, all of the above. And it's so funny because it's what all the great like sages of our time have been saying is, it all goes back to within. It all goes back to you, because everything comes as a reflection. This is a full fractal experience. Everything is coming from you.
Did you just like let that pour out of you from God, Mikey? Because it sounded like it.
But it's so cool.
Like I just meant the way you said it was cool.
You know what I mean? It's so cool. When you think about it, you're like, oh, this experience is so fun. Like, yes, there's the yin and yang, like this duality world we live in, you know, and it's hard sometimes and rough, and you're going through, you know, shit, and it sucks. But the pendulum always swings. And so like when you have the rough days, you start to look at them and you're like really grateful. Like, I'm really grateful I have Kayla to rely on during the tough times. And we can talk about it openly and say, hey, look, like, today sucked.
I know.
and laugh about it and take like the dense energy away from it, rather than exploding on each other and fighting for stupid made up things. Oh, this happened at work today, and you take it out on your other significant other. Like, that happens all over the place. And it's just because we're not taught how to manage our emotions, and we're really not taught to share our emotions, especially like men. And that's just, again, conditioning bullshit that we're fed through social media, online television, movies, you name it.
Yeah, that's totally true. And I just, first of all, the way that you said everything like flowed perfectly. I was like, you're literally just channeling it from source. Second, like, I totally agree. I feel the same way too about you, where I'm always like, oh, I'm just grateful. I even said that today. We were both like stressed today, and I was like, I'm so glad I get to see you. Because then I know I can just like relax and be like, oh, today was weird, and then just
that's the trick. That's the trick. Relax.
Yeah.
And remember that, because that's the hard part, is we're like so afraid to go neutral, because we've been taught like we need to fix it if it's not. No, there's nothing to fix. You would just you accept it.
Neutral is everything. That's something that I learned. So something I was going to say too, when you're talking about Dr. Joe Dispenza, he didn't resonate with me at first, because he resonated with you and a lot of the people I coach who are more analytical. I needed to hear it from like Neville Goddard first, because he was like, so he's a Pisces.
Shout out to all
he
the
needed
Pisces.
To be like
shout out
like me. I needed to hear it where he's like, you just visualize what you want, and like God's magic goes through. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. Like, I totally just like believed him, and it made sense to me. And so like I think that matters too, just based on like who you are. I would listen to that. But I like Neville because I heard a quote from him this morning actually that I can't remember, but he was talking about how your power like lies in neutrality. Basically, when you're like neutral to something, that's like the present moment people are talking about. That's like
there's no want, there's no need.
That's what the living in the end is, when people think that it means being delusional, and it's not. It's literally just like, if you had that thing for years, you would be like, that's normal, and you just go on with your day and like be present. It's
so simple that we make it complex, and we're the ones who stop it. It's that simple. And it's a hard line because I get this, because sometimes I'll see myself and I'm like, oh, I'm putting resistance on this. I'm like looking for something. You don't look for something that exists.
I always annoy myself when I do that, and I'm always like, you're looking for it. That means you're not in the end state. And I always have to like pull back and be like, why do I have resistance to this?
And that's it though. That's the daily work. And that's what, is so cool about this, whole process is it's not like, oh, overnight everything's just good. Like that's and you never experience anything negative. That's not true. That's
also like a weird false thing. I think I always thought when I first learned about law of attraction, when I first learned about law of assumption and like Neville Goddard and like changing self-concept, I thought there was this weird rainbow thing that like you just wouldn't have negative thoughts anymore, but it was never that. And so I always thought I was doing something wrong because of that, and then that's not what it is. It's literally just like you just learn what your mind is, and eventually it just gets normal to like look at the reflection, which also was weird for me at first. I remember not understanding what that meant, and I also was like, I don't get how people like, what is this person's doing this, like how is that me, or like I don't get how what that's reflecting back. But then once you kind of like look at examples, I think from other people, that helped me a lot. Or like then I started actually like being like, oh, what is this reflecting about me? And I was like, you got to be really honest with yourself though. Then you start to just do it all the time. You're like, oh, this is reflecting this, and this is reflecting that.
And on like that same note, when you are reflecting, like having forgiveness and loving yourself is probably like one of the best, most important things you can do. And that can't be highlighted enough. Like loving yourself is something we all like really don't do. In fact, weirdly, we're kind of like taught not to. We're taught like it's like inappropriate or selfish and all this, whatever. But you should have so much self-confidence and like so much love, about yourself and for yourself, and forgiveness for yourself. And oh my gosh, your life would change. Like this guilt and this shame and all this stuff that we're taught is the worst thing you can do for your nervous system, for your body, for your experience. And so many of us have taught ourselves we're not worthy. We haven't earned the right to relax. We haven't earned the right to feel good. I've never felt good in my life, Mike, all this different stuff. And so it's very hard to get in that feeling. And I understand, but relaxation is the best way to get into that feeling. and reminding yourself, talking to yourself, I don't, I deserve to relax. I do love myself, and you have to start to create these, patterns of self-love and self-care, because that's going to allow you to heal, which allows you to forgive others, which allows you to now begin to create. See, you can't like go into creation having all these, different attachments weighing you down.
That's totally true too. And I think
it's a natural progression.
It is. Well, and it does feel like weird at first. Cause like, I know what you're talking about. Like I remember trying to like become confident, and I was like confident. Like I never like felt like that in my whole life. So I was like, I don't know how to like, especially when I first started doing like self-concept, I was like, what? And so I literally had to just like I literally created like a character where I was like, how would I dress if I felt hot or something? And I literally just had to like, and it felt so weird. I had to like contemplate that. And then I would like kind of shift around, and I'd be like, okay, this. And then you get kind of used to the feeling, and then you could just add more to it. But it is like weird at first.
So today I host a show called Perspective Shift, and we covered this guy. He's like this internet guy, social media, YouTube, TikTok, social, Instagram.
What is his name?
His name's Star Jesse Taylor. He's awesome. Check out his stuff. He's great. Watch his stuff. And he posts, videos on, this type of stuff regularly.
Yeah.
When it comes to, manifestation and creation, and all that. I forgot where I was going with this.
I was talking about how I never felt confident.
Oh yeah. Never felt confident. Yeah. Thank you. So he posted this video today that was great. That was like, confidence doesn't come before the action. Confidence comes after the action. And he explained this like very simply and very easily understood. So you got to check out his stuff. But confidence isn't something that we have and muster up and do all this before. It's acknowledging, hey, this feels kind of weird. I've never done this before. And talking yourself through it, not getting worked up, but just, hey, I understand this is new. I understand this feels comfortable because I haven't done it. But what if this works out? And what if this works out in my favor? And going into this with an optimistic, type of attitude. And then through that, then confidence, comes.
Yeah,
because you've now done it, and then you feel confident because you've broken through. And so it was kind of exactly what you were just saying.
Yeah, literally.
Which is like, all right, I would do this, and you start to do it, and now the confidence is there. It comes after the action.
I was thinking about that today because I was thinking about like how I talk now and like dress and how I like go on camera. I'm just like, anyway, this is what I believe. I remember even being afraid, even like I think 6 months into me working on self-concept, to even like start my YouTube or anything. Like I was afraid to even like make videos because like, what if nobody wants to hear what I have to say? Like I was still struggling with it. So like it can take time sometimes, not that it has to take forever, but it did take me like time. But I remember like when I first started, I was like, okay, that was the first thing I applied the reflection thing to, was like weight loss and confidence. And I was like, okay, what beliefs must I have that caused me to like dress in baggy clothes and like not want to be seen? And I was like, or not like speaking to people, and I was like, oh, I like don't want to be seen. Like that was like my thing. I was like, I didn't want to be like perceived. And I was like, oh, so I just was like, what if I did want to? And I just like did a lot of what ifs. That helped me a lot, because it wasn't like all of a sudden, I always describe it like jumping a staircase. I wasn't like, oh yeah, I like don't want to be seen. Now all of a sudden I do. And like it wasn't like, I literally was like, oh, what if I did? Like how would I dress? And I had to like consciously do little things. That's when I started wearing the claws and the bat wings, my lashes and nails, because it helped me embody it.
But that's it, like little by little you're watching the neural pathway like begin to form, you know, and that's like what's going on, guys, is like it's just a new habit. And I know it feels weird and I know it feels uncomfortable. I have also been there and still there with certain things. And it's understanding, yeah, this feels weird now, because I'm changing the pattern. I'm changing the habit. And until you go through that uncomfortable feeling, nothing will change.
Yeah. Like I did that even again with the weight loss example. We're taught to like look in the mirror and like point out everything you hate about yourself. And I remember that was like one of the first things I changed, but I was like force myself every time I looked in the mirror to like point out 3 things I liked about myself, and it eventually like redirected. Now I like, it's so weird because now that like never happens to me. I never look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, this is bad. Yeah, I'm always like, oh, I look hot. Like I literally think that every time. Like I just completely changed the way I think about that. Like, it's just weird.
And how you look at yourself is just a mental pattern, guys. And this takes away a lot of like the pain and the sorrow and like the grief of like, oh my God, I hate myself. I'm so depressed. No. You don't like the character. The character's done. It's overplayed. We don't want to have anything to do with it. And we let go of it. And how freeing that is. And you're like, oh my gosh, like this is so important.
Yeah, I made a video about this today too. When you have a hard time letting go of the character, it's because your mind or somehow you think that that's keeping you safe in some way. Like the old story somehow is keeping you safe. Like whether it's from being seen, whether it's from like maybe, you know, you would have to be outside of your comfort zone and actually like be confident. Maybe you have a fear of like failing at that or something, like anything like that. There's some sort of thing your mind's trying to protect you from by keeping you in the old story of like holding on to like, yeah, but I'm this way. Yeah, but that will never happen. In some way, your brain's trying to be like, you're safe over here. That's why you can't like let go of that.
I think you can learn something every day about life and what Kayla and I are talking about. And so I'll share like a personal story that just happened to me this last week. So I work in real estate, and I was at a listing appointment with a new client they want, you know, to sell their home. And this gentleman is, I think, 86 years old, and his wife was 82. And he starts talking to me about, you know, his time, you know, serving in war, you know, all of this jazz, right? And he tells me, he goes, you know, the biggest and most important thing I would share with anyone that I learned from my experience, you know, on this earth is learning how to control fear and learning what fear is, and that fear is not a bad thing, and fear is here to help you learn about yourself. It's here to help you grow, and it's here for you to channel into something powerful like love. This 86-year-old man blew my socks off. And I was like, that was the most wise, profound thing you have ever said, sir. And it was awesome to hear. And the whole trick is we're not going to get rid of fear, guys. It's not getting rid of anything. It's learning like, okay, as things come up, I know what they are. I know how to navigate them, and I know what they can blossom and turn into. And everything is evolving in a great direction. It's never meant to hurt you. It's never meant to screw you. It's never meant to, you know, pin you down. None of that. Every experience can be turned into some amazing opportunity for you. Everything.
Yeah, that's honestly a really good point. That's, you know, really true.
Well, yeah. It's just like, I don't care if you're at the most dead-end job that you hate right now. If you started to look at this job as if, oh my gosh, this job is actually the stepping stone to where I really want to be, because I'm going to meet this person somehow. Yeah. And this person is going to introduce me to, you know, whatever. Well, and also there's an infinite number of ways that this can happen. So there's nothing right now in your situation that you have to be upset about. It's actually accepting everything and going, oh my gosh, I'm exactly where I needed to be right now to hear this message. And I'm okay with that. And I know that everything is working in my favor. And watch just like the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, how much of a difference you experience in your life. And you will be like, what is this? It seriously feels like magic.
Yeah. And even like everything, I always try to look at it like that too. Like everything that happens like negatively, it's still, even if you like react in the moment, it's still, even if you didn't meet somebody at the job that would bring you to the next job that you liked, how would you have known you didn't want to do that job, or like that you wanted to do something else unless you did the job that you didn't like everything was just showing you things. And I always think about that looking back on like any experience I've ever had, and I was like, that totally, like I wouldn't even have known to change this if I didn't do this, like, or if I didn't experience this. And so I think that a lot about things too. Like the negative is, I always try to talk about how nothing's technically negative in the sense like that, in the sense that it like just kind of showed you where you need to move next. So how could it have been negative if it was just part of the bridge of incidents like leading you here?
So if I were you listening to this, I would ask myself, like, what character have I been, you know, associating with? What
just
role?
Right, who am I?
Yeah,
like,
yeah. What have I been
right
identifying as? Because when you start to list it out, now you're like, oh my gosh. And you can easily say, I'm none of those. Like you inherently know this in your being, but you're like, oh my gosh, I am acting this way. And so like, this is step one, is awareness, knowing, okay, hey, look, I'm operating on these types of patterns. I know that these types of patterns aren't going to bring me what I want, you know, or bring me the experience I'm looking for. Now, when these patterns come up, I'm going to recognize them, and I'm going to start a new pattern. in moving in the direction I want to do. And this is going to feel uncomfortable at first and the second time. But on that third time, it's going to be a little easier.
And it's not even just telling yourself the story. I think a lot of people struggle with that, where they're just like, okay, I'm loved. Everyone likes being around me, but they don't believe it at all. And it just like feels weird to even say. Mm-hmm. And so I think more of the work that you can do, or more of like the power that you have, is like when you go to take action to do something and like consciously choosing a different action or reaction, or a different habit. Just choosing something else to do than you normally would do, and acting from the new character. Then that's kind of how you build up the new neural pathway, is literally just acting from the new character. In my opinion, that's how I think building a new self-concept works. No, that's awesome. And your energy and your focus is everything. This is why social media companies are fighting it over, who can keep as many people on their apps as possible. Everybody's fighting for your attention, because where your attention goes is where your energy goes. And that's the most important thing you can remember is, well, actually, I'll bring up Star Jesse Taylor again, because I was just talking about him this morning, and he's got a great point on this. The way this brain and system works, is an algorithm. Just like the algorithm on your TikTok, on your, Facebook, on your social media, all of that. The more content that you give attention to, the more of that content, that type of content, will be shown to you. Okay? This is exactly how our brains, our minds, our bodies, everything works. So like the more, and it doesn't take into account, oh, I hate this, this is disgusting, or, you're protesting it or whatever. Wherever you give your attention to, it's going to show you more and more of that. That's how these algorithms feed us, and that's how this works. And there's no different than how this brain works. So however we look at a situation is how our brain is going to know, hey, you're giving your brain attention during this time. I need to give you much more of this situation. So that's why when Kayla and I talk about going neutral, you take away where your attention's going, and this diminishes that old pattern, because you're no longer giving attention to that pattern, so it begins to go away. And your mind will say, oh, you can't ignore me. Oh, you're just putting your head in the sand. Oh, this. No. Let it jabber. I hear you, mind. Nice try. And it begins to fade away. And again, where your attention goes, now when those things come up, you're like, oh, that doesn't even faze me. And it's because you've now trained the brain to go, hey, the situations like that are ridiculous. Of course, you're not this or you're not that. And that is a new pattern, a healthy pattern. And now you're creating. Yeah, that's always how you know. It's like when you don't react to things anymore, you're like, oh, yeah. I'm just like. But I remember when I started not reacting to things, and in my head, I was like, oh my God, I so would have reacted to that. Yeah, I know what you mean. And that's how you know that you're just all you're doing is perceiving your like 3D through the new character. So then things like that, you're just like, oh, that wouldn't affect this character. Like, this is how this character would react. Then eventually that's just kind of who you are again. That's when the neural pathway is built. Yeah. So. Yeah. Any last words of advice for them? My advice would be write down who you are right now and just be super honest with yourself. And if you can't think of any traits you have or something, like think about what you experience day to day and what emotions you have and what beliefs somebody must have, or what story somebody must have about themselves who experiences that every day. Then think about what you want to experience, and then what beliefs you would have to have that experience. And then I would start just creating a character and acting from the character, at least for a week. And you'll see, like, number one, how much better you feel. And number two, like, you'll see a shift pretty quickly, I think, in my opinion, of like what things you like start to notice and experience. What I would say, just to kind of keep it simple, this is what a friend has shared with me forever, and it really rings true, is the only thing that you think you are doing wrong, or the only thing wrong that you're doing that you think you're doing is wrong, is thinking you're doing something wrong. So at the end of the day, what he's trying to say is you're never not ahead. You never should be somewhere else. You should never, there's nothing that you should have done already. The only thing out there that's holding you back is you thinking that there's something wrong. So there's nothing wrong. Exactly where you're at is where you're supposed to be. In fact, you need to learn to love that version of yourself and say, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe this. I've been holding myself back this whole time, and begin to forgive yourself. And I really, I know your life will blossom. So Yeah, I think that's very true too, honestly. That's true. You'll experience whatever you believe. So if you believe you're doing something wrong, that's what you're going to experience.
Thanks for joining us this week, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye.